and welcome to the Future You webinar run by Prospects. Today we're focusing on the transition from university to the workplace. I'm your host, Emily Slade, and I'm host of the Future You podcast, also run by Prospects. This afternoon, our panel are going to answer some prepared questions around moving from uni to work. We will also have time at the end for an open Q&A, so if you do think of any questions throughout the session that you would like our panel to answer, please do pop them in the Q&A box and we'll address them at the end. For more career advice, articles, videos, and podcast episodes, head to prospects.ac.uk and you can register there for free. But let's meet our panel. So if you'd like to introduce yourself, Rebecca.
Thank you, Emily. My name's Rebecca Fielding. I'm the founder and managing director of Gradconsult. I'm also a fellow of the Institute of Student Employers, which represents employers who recruit students and graduates across the UK. And I'm the architect and lead researcher on the student to professional psychometric model. So that's a little bit about me.
Brilliant, thank you. Gareth.
Hi everyone. My name's Gareth Hill. I'm a careers consultant at Swansea University. So I do a lot of work kind of one-to-one in careers appointments and teaching sessions to students. One of my particular areas of interest is the whole kind of psychological and kind of mindset aspect of finding and keeping a job, and how students can avoid feeling kind of stressed and anxious about taking action that's actually going to help them. So hopefully that will come across in the webinar today.
Perfect. Chiamaka.
Hi, I'm Chiamaka, and I'm an IT graduate at GIST. So I'm a newly graduated student-ish, so I can relate to everything that's going on. But yeah.
Perfect. And Ruben.
Hi everyone, I'm Ruben. I graduated 2 years ago now, and I'm a graduate at GISC at the moment.
Perfect. So let's dive in. Question 1. What was the biggest mindset shift you had to make when transitioning from uni to full-time work? So Rebecca, if we're okay to start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it was obviously a long time ago now, and the context has changed somewhat. But for me, it was really about changing that mindset from, being in an environment where everything was set up to help me succeed. For me, I was driving to achieve my goals, to achieve my best. And it was everybody's job around me to help me succeed and to be at my very best. Be that with housing support, health support, educational support, attainment, seminars, academics. Everybody was employed. It was their job to help me thrive and succeed. And that was what I was focused on. What do I need to do and who can help me to do it? And then, of course, when you move into the world of work, actually, the psychological contract is fundamentally different. First and foremost, I was being paid to deliver a job. The employer was the consumer of my talents, of my skills, of my drive. And I really need to shift my focus away from what I wanted to do with my time, the work that I was interested in and wanted to prioritize, the things that I wanted to achieve with my career, and instead focus my efforts on what I needed to do to support my colleagues, support my manager to make their life as easy as possible, and to line up with the business goals. So instead of thinking about what I wanted and what I was interested in, really shifting that mindset into actually how can I deliver real value for others around me first. And that took me quite a long time to make that shift. For a very long time I was thinking, why isn't everybody just as interested in me and my career as I am? What's going on? And actually I realized that once I made that shift, actually that was the key to my career development and my progression, was really focusing on how to deliver for others, for my team, for my manager. That really unlocked a lot for me, but it was sticky and it took a long time. So that's the big one for me.
Yeah, brilliant. And Chiamaka.
I think the big one for me is adjusting from, like, you submit an assignment, they grade it, they give you formal feedback. And essentially you're paying the teachers to teach you, so they're interested in you. But like Rebecca says, yeah, they're paying you to deliver work, so they have expectations, and you need to understand those expectations and navigate like the office dynamic, the workload and everything, and learn how to communicate properly and professionally, and not just say to like, in uni it's different where you say to your teacher, well, I don't understand this, or like I can't go over this, or can we schedule to a different time. But there's different expectations, and that you have to take into account other people's time and effort as well, not just your own. Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is I've been paid to be here, so I have to be present and be here, kind of thing. But yeah, I think that's the biggest thing for me.
Absolutely, that's such a good point. Thank you. Perfect. So, how do you recommend students stay resilient when facing uncertainty or rejection in their job search? So, Gareth, we're going to start with you.
Yeah, so I'm going to borrow an expression from the world of sport, which is maybe something you've heard before, which is control the controllables. So, when I'm working with students, a lot of the time people can get bogged down in all the things you can't control. So, you can't control how many other people are going to apply for the job, necessarily what the company is going to think of you and so on. And that can make you sometimes feel, is it actually worth applying? What are some things you can actually control, though? You can control blocking out some time regularly to make applications. You can control not just having a plan A, but having sort of other plans and kind of parallel plans as well. So often students might feel that they've just got to have, a plan A, a plan B. Should I choose postgraduate studies? Should I choose a job? Well, we try and encourage students to like basically parallel plans. So, if you're undecided about what you're going to do, then apply for some different options and kind of see what comes back. And the other thing to mention on this is another sporting term, which is all about self-talk, basically the messages that we give ourselves. So if you apply to a company and don't hear back from them, we can often beat ourselves up and think, I'm worthless, my application's useless, there's no point in applying. So how do we sort of talk back to those negative voices and maintain a long-term perspective, really? So when you start to hear that dialogue going on in your head saying, now's the time to give up, how you can almost sort of talk back to yourself with a more positive mindset.
Yeah, brilliant. Chiamaka, the same question.
As much as rejection is tough, you can't see it as a dead end. I realize. Obviously, you always not always, but most of the time, rejection will come your way in anything that you do, whether it's applying for a job or talking to someone or whatever. But you can't see it as I have to give up now. You have to keep going. And you have to kind of refine your approach as you, whether it's look for a job, look for a graduate scheme, look for anything, and understand what is it that is wanted from the employers or anybody, and what is it that you want as well. So I feel like I found it really, really helpful to kind of treat each application as a test to myself. So it doesn't really give you anxiety when you're coming into it. So as much as you're like, this is real, I have to pass and that kind of thing, you're also not seen as the end of the world. And after this, it's over for me kind of thing. And you have to also reflect what went wrong, what can I do better? Is this right for me? Do they want me kind of thing, like in terms of my skills, and would that be helpful to them? Oh, and as daunting as it sounds, you have to kind of go back to the people you applied to and be like, what can I do better? Because feedback is important. And as students, you can't learn on your own most of the time. You have to get that feedback to really say, oh, what went wrong, what went well, what can I do better, kind of thing. So yeah, it also helps to keep building skills. So as much as you're facing rejection, you have to keep doing other things that will keep improving yourself, your skills, yourself, whether it's professionally as a person. It can be anything really. It can be a course or just, I don't know, general experience in life, that kind of thing.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. And Ruben, how do you recommend people stay resilient?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great points being made already. I definitely understand where people come from. When I graduated, it took me about a year to find my first job, so I can definitely understand that. I think an important thing to bring up is that you're not alone. Everybody at the moment, the graduate job market is incredibly difficult. So try not to feel that it's too personal. Everybody is struggling at the moment with it. Some advice for that. I found that I got quite attached to a few different jobs where I then didn't hear back, and that made the rejection so much harder. So I would say to try not to get too attached to any one particular job and start planning your life around it until you at least start to hear back from them. And I think it's important as well that your first job might not always be your forever job for the rest of your life. It doesn't have to be the perfect fit. There's obviously there's red lines for everyone on what they want in a career, but you need to be able to have some compromise on what you're willing to compromise there to get that first job. And once you get that first job, it becomes so much easier after that.
Yeah, just getting your foot in the door. Perfect. Ruben, we're going to stay with you. For what advice would you give to graduates who feel they lack real world experience?
Yeah, so I mean, at the top of my bullet points, I just have so did everyone else at some point. Everybody has had to enter the job market at one point. Um, I think finding a good workplace, they will help you get that experience. And when you're really clear when you're applying to jobs that you may not have that exact industry experience, then they're aware of that. And they're there to help you develop yourself, because at the end of the day, once you've developed yourself, you're going to be able to help that company the best way possible. For applying for jobs, and you feel like you don't have that much experience in that industry, try to think about other work that you've done that could apply similar skills. So I used a lot of my hospitality experience. I brought that up in interviews. You can use those nice buzzwords to make it all sound very professional. And people will get an idea for the experience you have, not just within that industry.
Yeah, perfect. Gareth, what stands out to you when reviewing graduate CVs or LinkedIn profiles, and what's overdone?
Okay, so as people are aware, a lot of people are applying using AI at the moment, and that's basically one of the reasons why the market is so competitive at the moment, and companies have got kind of hundreds of applications to look through. When we have that within my university, when we've been recruiting for particular roles, it's often quite obvious when people have done that and just use AI in their application. So one of the things I've noticed recently is that everyone seems to have the word leverage in their CV. Everyone's leveraging everything. So it's an example of a word that we don't use in normal conversation, but all of a suddenly just miraculously appears. So I think if what's overdone is basically kind of being quite generic in your application. So I think if you can spend some time reflecting, as a couple of people have mentioned already about, what are your strengths, what are your selling points, what's distinctive about you, what are your achievements, what is it, you're effectively the product which you're pitching to an organization, and thinking about, what you've been studying, what you've done in part-time jobs, what is the package that you're offering really. Because if you don't do that and do that reflection, then you're going to struggle to kind of be coherent in terms of what you're actually offering. So thinking about what you're able to offer, and also giving some supporting examples of that as well. So it may mean you need to go away after the session and think about what you've been doing in the course, think about particular projects or part-time jobs or extracurricular stuff, and then come back with some pointers for what it is you're actually offering.
Yeah, perfect. And Rebecca, same question.
Lovely. So I've been recruiting students and graduates since before the year 2000. So I dread to think how many tens of thousands of student and graduate CVs and applications I've seen over time. What's interesting is there are some patterns which are perennial. So it has ever been thus. And then there are some things which have changed over time. Gareth just touched on one of those, which is the use of AI. I was going to use the word moreover, Gareth. We're seeing a lot of use of the word moreover recently rather than leverage, but I shall keep my eye out for leverage now as well. So I think that over-reliance is certainly something we're seeing at the moment and is overdone. Interestingly, there was a recent research study I was looking at that said instead of seeing a normal distribution of scores across applications and CVs at recruitment, we're actually seeing more of these peaks at either end, which would suggest to us those students who would have maybe been a mid to average score normally with their applications, in over-relying on AI, are actually getting worse scores, not better scores. So I would say absolutely use it as a source of research as you would do anywhere else. The key thing that really stands out as the antithesis to that are students who've actually done their research beyond their laptop. So those people who've come along to a careers event that teams like Gareth's run, a presentation, they've come to a careers fair, they've chatted to people, they've connected with somebody that they know on LinkedIn who might work there, they've gone into the industry press to see what awards they're winning, what their key people are talking about, they've read the annual report in terms of their key strategic priorities. They've looked at all of those things. They've not just relied on what's on the digital desktop, but actually they've connected with people. They've spoken to people in the organisation. If it's an actual retailer or a consumer-facing brand, they've tried the product. They've looked at the new product innovation. They've gone and looked at ranging in store, or they've experienced the customer experience. That is absolute gold dust. And I would say less than 5% of applications, CVs or cover letters I've ever read demonstrates that depth of connection and understanding and interest in an organisation. So those are the things that I'd really recommend. Go beyond the desktop, and it makes such a significant difference. The only other thing that I'd say is overdone are some of those things which are the perennial things that we've seen for a long time, which is, you know, phrases like, I can work on my own and in teams. Great, fantastic. So can most of the animal world. Never mind human beings. So try to avoid cliches. Think instead, to Gareth's point, what are your unique strengths? What are the things that make you special and who you are? Ruben talked about his customer service experience, his hospitality experience. I too worked in bars and restaurants, maybe great at problem solving, dealing with the public. It meant I had a great work ethic, but I had all the, you know, I had a chemistry degree at the same time, which gave me different experiences. I spoke to my parents, my friends, my family. If you had to describe me in 3 words, what would you use and why? So I developed that self-awareness that Gareth talked about. And I was able to say uniquely, these are the things that make me, me, that are very different. And they're the complete, again, antithesis of those generic statements that you tend to see on everybody's CVs. So that will be my additions.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. Gareth, back to you. For what tips do you have to build confidence before interviews?
Okay, so one of the things I find useful as a tip is trying to simulate the interview as much as possible. So if, for example, you know it's going to be a video interview, you know, doing some practice using that format and doing some research into the particular questions, but then basically simulating the interview. So it would be, you know, setting up your device, having a go at watching, you know, practicing the questions to a certain time limit, and then kind of like playing it back to yourself, and which is a bit cringy, obviously, but you know, kind of watching it and reviewing it and giving some sort of feedback on that. So that would be one tip. Another thing that sometimes students will say to me is, you know, I'm worried that if I'm halfway through the answer, if I just go blank, surely that just means it's all going to be, you know, a disaster, and you know, it's going to go wrong after that, really. So it's almost thinking, well, you know, if that does, something like that does happen, or if you do lose the way, or you don't hear all of the question, you know, practicing what are you going to do in that circumstance. So, you know, for example, asking the interviewer if they could perhaps repeat the question, or just pausing for a couple of seconds. So thinking about that. And another thing that I find useful as well is if, for example, you've got like your interview in the afternoon, talking to students about, you know, what are they going to do on that day to prepare themselves for the afternoon. So do they, you know, in order to relax, do they want to listen to music? Would they go for a walk? Would they have a coffee, or would a coffee make them too? Some people, if they drink a coffee, are too, you know, wound up, and that's not useful for them. But, you know, thinking about the whole day really, and what they're going to, what they're going to do to prepare. So I guess those tips are all about kind of trying to make sure you're kind of like simulating the experience as close as possible, but also getting into the right kind of psychological viewpoint. So if you think you're going to get really stressed, what are the things that help you to relax and get there in a good frame of mind?
Yeah, perfect. And Rebecca, same question.
So I think for me, I would echo a lot of what Gareth has said. Practice is the key. So whenever you get something, particularly if it's novel or different and you haven't done it before, most folks don't realise the vast array of resources that are available to you through your careers teams to be able to go to things like perhaps simulated assessment centres, mock interviews with feedback. It might be looking at video interviews. Many universities have video interview platforms where you can practice. So particularly if it's novel and you haven't done it before, the more you practice, the better you're going to be. And I'm sure Ruben and Chiamaka would also recognise that their performance increased over time. And it wasn't necessarily that their skills had massively changed, but they got much more accustomed to the assessment method. So practice, practice, practice would definitely be my top tip. Self-management, as Gareth has said, in terms of self-talk, in terms of self-regulation. Do the thing that helps you bring rest and quiet and some peace into your own levels of confidence before you come in. And then we all draw our confidence from different places. So some of us draw confidence from prior experience. Some of us have a more innate well of self-confidence. But one of the things, whoever you are, because it's always nerve-wracking going into these processes, is that validation and affirmation from others makes a huge difference to how we feel. And it's not necessarily in our DNA in the UK in the same way that it is in the US. You know, the US are brilliant at telling each other all the fabulous things they admire about each other and giving each other positive feedback. Not necessarily what we're great at here. But if you can gather some positive affirmation, some positive feedback from tutors, from peers, from friends, from family, and you can reassure yourself, read those actually beforehand, it can make a huge difference to the mindset and the confidence levels that you feel going into something. And I think the final point, which is something that Chiamaka talked about earlier, is to recognise and acknowledge that this is a two-way process. So just as much as this is about them assessing you for a role or an opportunity, it's also about you working out whether or not this is a type of environment, the type of organisation and type of role that you'd be good at. So recognising we can't all be square pegs in square holes. This isn't about curriculum where everybody can achieve a first if we all meet the same standards, because every organisation, every role is different. So I think that can really help with your levels of confidence as you go in, is to think, actually, this is just about me also working out what's right for me at this stage. So feeling that level of personal self-confidence as you go in, I think can really help.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Chiamaka, back to you with what's one thing you wish you'd done earlier to prepare for life after graduation?
I think for me, and this might be personal, like this is personal to me and some people, depends on your um characteristics, behavior, is I wish I'd been more social in a way. Like obviously they're networking events and they always say go for networking events. And you're like, yeah. So you go for one or two. Usually relating to your course or what you want to do. And that's fine. But I feel like if I'd gone for more or just even expanded my range, gone for different ones, even if it's not related to what I wanted to do, having that experience, talking to people, seeing what they do, like how does this relate to what I would like to do, or can it be related to what I would like to do? Having that experience as a whole would have been really helpful for me, especially now that I'm working. I can see, yeah, it's not just what you want to do is not just a small box. It's much wider. So having that experience doing different things, I also wish I'd explored more like career paths in a way. Like I know everyone says, oh, you don't always have to do what you studies in uni. I feel like we should really take that to heart because you think about it and you're like, oh no, but I've done this and I'm really I've studied this and I know what this is about. But having that confidence to say, oh, I might be interested in this. So let me explore this. would have been helpful as well. Even if you'd gone back to the path you wanted to know in the first place, having that experience and exploring different things would have been really helpful to me. I feel like I should have really, really done that. But yeah.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. And Rebecca, same question.
Lovely. So I think, I would totally echo what Chiamaka's just said. I think university as an experience is just, you're surrounded by so many opportunities, and you look back on that period, and once you're in the world of work and you go, I had no idea how much time I had, how much support there was, how many opportunities there were, how many options there were for me to explore. And so if I can encourage anybody, is to have that curiosity. Go out, connect, explore, take advantage of things, get involved in stuff as much as you can. And if you have already graduated and you're thinking, oh, well, that's all well and good, but I can't go back and do that. Actually, almost all career services have their offer available for at least up to 3 years. Sometimes it's a lifetime guarantee. So there can often still be employer events, careers fairs, resources, all kinds of different things that you can go back and you can still access. Network, talk to people, discover there's so much more that you don't know. And I think certainly in my drive to want to progress and go far and go fast, I thought clarity was the key. And actually, if I could go back and do anything to prepare myself, it would be curiosity at this stage in your career is the key, not clarity, curiosity. Be curious, ask questions, and seek to learn. It's just such a lovely stage to be in. There's so much opportunity. I know that can feel scary as well and a bit rudderless at times, but it's also a wonderful opportunity to give yourself the gift of exploring and curiosity.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. Ruben, over to you for what are the most common misconceptions students have when entering the job market?
Yeah, so when I was first looking to enter the job market, for context, I live far up in the north of England. I'm very rural, and I was convinced that I would have to move to a big city to find a job. I was looking for jobs in the tech industry, and that is just not the case anymore. There is obviously going to be an increase in the amount of jobs in big cities. But especially in this digital age that we all live in now, you don't necessarily need to move to London or Manchester to find these jobs. And just keep your eyes open for remote work, for work that's more local to you. I think also related to that, your job doesn't necessarily have to be in the industry that you're looking for. You might find if you've studied IT, and you might find that there is a science company that isn't related to it, but they still have an IT department, and there are so many jobs within these companies that are not necessarily that main focus of the company. And I think for once you're in the workplace as well, you need to realize that everybody else in the workplace is human as well. We're not all perfect. We're all going to make mistakes. So you can make mistakes. You cannot be perfect some of the time. I don't think anybody on this panel has 100% perfect days every single day. And so it's recognizing that and recognizing that everyone else around you is in the exact same boat, and we're all just trying to do as good as we can, really.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you. Rebecca, same question.
Lovely. Yeah, I think a lot of the misconceptions, I'd agree with things like looking outside of sectors. So, there are data, marketing, finance, sales, commercial roles in every sector, in retail, in engineering, in bioscience. Those roles exist everywhere. So definitely that look across sectors, don't be too sector specific. Definitely the geographical bit. I'd certainly get people to think about roles within small and medium-sized enterprises as well. So most graduates fixate on graduate programs. Actually, I did a full data analysis about 12 months ago, and I think only about 11% of graduates ever get onto a graduate scheme. So once you take out linear roles like midwifery, nursing, those kind of dentistry, veterinary, those kind of things, and all the other degree disciplines, and you look at the whole of our graduating population, how many get into a graduate programme? It's about 11%. So stop searching for graduate programmes. They're highly competitive because everybody else is searching for them too. And instead search for things like analyst, coordinator, officer, administrator, entry-level roles in the type of work that you're interested in. And don't be put off if it is a small to medium-sized business that's, Joe Sproggett's PLC that you've never heard of. Do you know what? Joe Sproggett's could be led by an amazingly charismatic, brilliant small business leader who's completely committed to graduates and young people and really care about your career. And do you know what? You might go further and faster than you would have done on a graduate programme because you're not limited by the structure of being there with 200 people and you've got to rotate, and this is when you get your salary reviews. In a small business, you come in and you do great work, you can get promoted as soon as you're ready. You can get a salary increase as soon as you're ready because there isn't that structure around. And depending on the market, between 25 and 33% of graduates each year will go and work for small businesses, less than 250 people. So I think that's another really big misconception. Don't worry if you don't get in a graduate programme. Most people don't. I didn't. Most people just get a job. That's how most of us start. Don't worry, that doesn't mean you've failed. And Ruben's already talked about how your first job doesn't define you. It's just your first job. So get a first job. Don't worry about the job title. What you want to do is find an environment where you can learn with people who you like and are interested in nurturing and growing you. And that can take you pretty much anywhere from there. Those are the things that you're looking for. So those would be my big misconceptions that I think a lot of people have, and I would love to see go away. And I hope I've broken some of those down for folks who are here.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. So we've got one more question in our list here before we move on to our live Q&A. So if you do have a question for our panel, get it into the chat box now and we can get that answered for you. But before we move on to that, Gareth, final question. What are red flags that you notice in applications that students might not even realise?
Yeah, so one of the big things that I spend a lot of time talking to students about are looking at the kind of essential and desirable criteria listed in the job. So use like NHS applications as an example. If you look on the NHS jobs website, each job has got a job description you can download. And if you look at it, it basically says, here's the essential criteria, here's the desirable criteria, here's what's going to be assessed at application, here's what's going to be assessed at the interview. And then at the end of the application form, there's a section which basically tells the person who's doing it, go back to the job description, look at the criteria and write about how you match that. And yet when I talk to a lot of students, they'll basically say, oh, I haven't really looked at that document. I've just basically written my application based on who I am and what I have to offer. So one useful tip with that is think of it a little bit like a mark scheme almost. So in the same way that with an academic subject, they give you the list of things to write about. So that's a big, I don't know what kind of flag that is, but that's certainly, to me it's a red flag. So within CVs, using the word we rather than I, that's quite a thing that comes up as well, where obviously the employer then can't tell what you've actually done. Using AI to write all of the application, when things are spelt wrong or the grammar's not correct. And also another one I've put down is about negative phrasing. So, for example, using the phrase, I worked with difficult customers. So, it implies that if somebody's written that are in hospitality, that, they're great. It's just all the customers that were a sort of nightmare or a disaster, really. So there's a few things there. And just reiterating the point that Rebecca mentioned before, really, I think the main thing in terms of, applications is about being authentic and trying to build a connection with the employer. So all this extra stuff that Rebecca was suggesting before, things like, talking to them, linking in with them, is thinking about how can you build that human connection with somebody? Because I noticed in the Q&A, there's quite a lot of questions about, opportunities. How can I get an opportunity if I'm just sat at home on my laptop? Well, it's thinking about what those opportunities that exist don't exist in thin air. They're actually attached to other humans. So think about the steps that you can make in terms of connecting and starting to build a relationship with those people, really, rather than just going on Indeed, uploading your CV to 100 jobs and sat there kind of despondent, thinking, well, I'm not hearing anything back.
Yeah, of course. Perfect. Thank you. So with that, we will now move across to our live Q&A. So thank you to everyone so far who's submitted questions. You've still got some time if you want to get some in. So panelists, if you feel like you can answer this, just raise your hand and I'll come to you. So question number 1, it's been a year since I have graduated, but till now I haven't got any single interview call and have applied for 100+ jobs. Can you guide me at this stage? How do I stay resilient as I'm an international student and currently on my graduate visa? Yes, Rebecca.
So first of all, I'm very sorry to hear that. I'm sure that is incredibly hard work. The first thing I would suggest is get yourself some experience. It doesn't necessarily need to be the ideal graduate job that you were hoping to get. So if you can get a job, any job, working part-time or volunteering or whatever it might be, that demonstrates work ethic. And I think Ruben said once you've got a job, it becomes so much easier to get another job. So I often see a lot of students really being held back, particularly in this first year, by, well, I'm not going to apply for that job because it's not what I thought I wanted to do. As Chiamaka said, it isn't what I wanted to do, or it's not the perfect job, or it's not exactly what I thought I wanted. So whilst you're on your graduate visa, you don't have any of those restrictions around salary. So just go and get anything, learn from it. You'll meet people, you'll make connections. They might be able to give you recommendations. You'll start to grow a professional network, whatever environment that is. You'll start to develop skills that you can talk about in interviews. All of those things are hugely, hugely helpful. And actually, from a personal perspective, in terms of your resilience, it also just makes you feel so much better because you're doing something. We know that work for human beings gives us a sense of purpose and it gives us a sense of achievement. And not working can actually feel incredibly bad for our mental health, and also just from a sense of isolation and belonging, being part of a team, working with other people, connecting with people. It's so important. So I would say find some ways to do that. The next and most important thing I would suggest, if you haven't already, is to go back to your university careers team. Now, you might be in a different part of the country if it's a year since you graduated to where you went, but you can still connect with them, you can still talk to them, you can still access support. So as well as just applying for jobs, I would be encouraging you to go to some events, be they digital or be they in person, to make those human connections that Gareth talked about. That's so, so critical for you to be able to make those human connections to people and follow up and learn about people. Over 100 applications is an awful lot of applications to have made. I don't know how much feedback you will have got because it's quite tricky for employers at the moment. We are experiencing, thanks to AI, the highest number of applications per vacancy that have ever been known on record. So it is almost impossible at this stage for employers to be able to respond to every application that they receive. But it might indicate to me that perhaps you might be able to get some support with that from the careers team as well. So some of the things I was talking about there, I often say, whenever anybody says to me, I've applied for 100 jobs, I'm like, okay, how about we think about applying for 5 jobs, but we spend 10 times the amount of time on those 5 jobs. And we really research them. We look at who's winning awards in the sector and why. We really understand what's going on for them. And the other key things are look at where your competition is going to be lower. So look at sectors that are less, sexy or attractive, brand names that are less sexy and attractive. If you're applying for a graduate program at Adidas, you will be up against thousands, if not tens of thousands of people. If you apply for an analyst job that's on the Prospects website, you might go, oh, well, is that a graduate level job? Yes, it's on the Prospects website for a reason. That's why it's on the Prospects website. But I can tell you, it get 10 times fewer views than the job that's got graduate analyst. So search the analysts, the coordinators, the administrators, the assistants, look for those jobs And look for organisations that perhaps people don't recognise or with the less sexy brand names. Your competition will be smaller, and so therefore your chances will be much higher. So it's a bit of a job hunting tip there. And then I think getting some support with looking at how you're finessing your application from your careers team could really help, because that's a lot to have done and not to have heard back at all. And then thinking about what you can be doing to make those human connections. That would be all of my advice. And then making sure that you can be doing something that gives you that sense of connection, belonging, purpose, be it volunteering or working. So important to keep yourself healthy and well in that period.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I loved how you mentioned volunteering there, because that does always feel like a much almost easier step in to the working world, even though it's obviously a voluntary position and you're not getting the salary that you perhaps wanted. At least you're getting that on the floor experience and hanging out with humans, which is the best thing you can do by the sounds of it. Perfect. So, bum bum bum, here it comes. We've talked a bit about it, and what's wrong with it, but how can I use AI in writing my CV? For what particular things should I use AI? And obviously, what shouldn't I use AI for? Ruben.
Yeah, so as Gareth has spoke about a lot, I think the biggest issue is it removes a lot of your personality if you just get AI to write your CV for you. But there's definitely still some good applications for it. So off the top of my head, I think structuring your CV, if you have no idea how you could even start structuring it and where things can go, you can maybe use it for that. And I would also say that once you have your CV, kind of the draft copy nearly ready to go, then use it to critique it. If you upload your CV and ask it to critique it against maybe the job criteria that you're looking at, then you can maybe look to then develop it further, but using your own words rather than getting it to do it for you.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Thank you. And then on the flip side of that, we've got, I understand not being generic in your CV. However, many companies, as we know, do now use AI to look through applications. So should we be using the buzzwords so the AI can essentially catch those and then they get put onto the next stage? Rebecca.
Okie dokie. So this is, I'm afraid, somewhere I'm going to have to really bust a myth, because graduates and students believe that companies are using AI to screen their applications. The reality in the ISE survey that came out just last week is we're still looking at well under 20% of the big corporate graduate recruiters who are using AI in their screening process. So that's the very top end of the graduate recruitment market. The vast majority of employers who are mid-sized employers, supply chain employers you've never heard of, or small businesses aren't using AI at all. They're not using it. So you will see an awful lot of content about this, primarily from people who want to sell you their abilities to be able to make your CV AI proof and stuff your CV through the ways to cheat the ATS. Most of those people, if you look into their background, have no background in recruitment and have never used an ATS in their life. The ATS is rejecting my CV, is made up. I'm afraid an applicant tracking system, the ATS, is little more for most recruiters than a giant filing cabinet that has the ability to be able to send mass emails. Now, what it can do, back to Gareth's point about essential criteria and desirable criteria, what it can do and often will do is ask you some very specific questions, things like, do you have a driving license? That's an essential criteria. Do you want to live and work in Newcastle? That might be an essential criteria for the role. Whatever those essential criteria are, you have to answer yes or no to those. Now, if you don't meet the basic essential criteria, it can knock you out on that basis. But other than that, the vast majority of the time, it's a human being at the other end of this process who is reading your application. So this is one of those things, I think, where there's an awful lot of hype that's been created. Those of us who work in the industry, myself, Lee Harding, many others, are really trying to counter this narrative to get out to students to let you know, please don't be fooled by this stuff. It's simply not true. Is it coming? Yes. Probably, but legislation might catch up in the meantime. So, for example, in the EU, there is very clear legislation that it can't be used for recruitment for lots of good reasons, not least because of the potential bias that exists within AI at the moment. So, we might very well see that legislation catches up on this before the implementation does. But where it's being used, it's very much for process automation, where judgment and decision making is required, unless it's black and white, essential criteria or not, then it's often a human who's looking. So please don't stuff your CV with words, because the human will just go, oh no, I just wanted to know who you were. So that's my 10 pence on that one. I can see Gareth wants to add as well there.
Brilliant. Thank you, Gareth.
Yeah, I was just going to add in about cover letters as well, because often students will get quite bogged down with, they're just asking me for a CV. So a cover letter is your opportunity to talk about, the reasons why you want that particular role, what attracts you to that company. So when we're talking about kind of standing out and being authentic, if you've actually put some thought into that, again, that's something which a lot of people don't do. And then also adding in some outlining how you meet the criteria of the job role in the cover letter. So if you add that in on top of on top of a CV, then that substantially, gives the employer a lot more evidence and a lot more things about you. So if you do have the opportunity to upload that as well, that's certainly something else in addition that can help you to stand out then.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So, what do people think about taking notes into an interview with you? I've had this recommended, but somehow I'm not sure how it would be viewed. Rebecca?
I absolutely love to see a candidate with notes. All that says to me is somebody who's prepared, who's thought about it, who really wants the job. And, the purpose of an interview isn't to trip you up. It's not to trick you. It's not to see who does the best under pressure. The reason I'm interviewing people is because I want to find the best person for the job. And if your notes help you to give the best answer and show off your skills, then fill your boots. Fantastic. So I would always say there's nothing wrong with taking your notes in with you at all. In fact, I love to see it.
Perfect. And are we talking sort of, or is there not a difference, one double-sided A4, or can you bring like almost a booklet?
I've had people bring entire portfolios of things in before. They've kind of they've gone through my competency matrix and gone, right, I'm going to gather some evidence for each one. And then when I've asked them, to give me an example of that particular competency or strength or behavior, they've flicked to the relevant bit and gone, here's an example of a piece of work or something I've done. And it just made me go, what a brilliant applicant. They've really thought about this. They've really, it honestly made me feel joyful that this was a really great candidate. So do what is going to help you. Some people might feel that that slows them down because they'd be flicking through and it would make them too nervous. For others, it makes them feel really prepared. But even the process of thinking about collecting your evidence for different competences and examples, even if you don't physically take it in with you, can be super helpful. And that might be as much as, like you say, a couple of sides of jotted notes, my best example, so that my brain doesn't give me an awful one when I panic in the interview, whatever it might be. But yeah, it can look like anything. I've seen a whole variety.
Amazing. Ruben?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with Rebecca there. I think especially with the point around when you're making those notes, it's bringing it to the forefront of your mind. I was always a note taker before my interviews, and then I would find by the time I actually got into the interview, it was already up here in my head anyway. So I ended up not having to use the notes that much. I think one thing I would just say though, is that I think there's a bit of a balance between bringing in notes, which is really helpful, and going in looking like you're reading off a script the entire time and barely looking up. So it's about kind of making sure you're bringing in the right notes, and you're not just relying on reading off your script of paper.
Yeah, perfect. Amazing. So I ended up with a 2-2 degree. Statistically, that means I'm in the bottom 30% of graduates in the UK. While many organisations accept 2-2 degrees, you're still competing with the top 70% of graduates with 2-1s and firsts. How can I stand out with a 2-2? Rebecca?
I have a 2-2. There's nothing wrong with that. The first thing I would say, I'm going to quote Gareth from one of the earlier questions in the session, which is control the controllables, right? There's nothing you can do about the fact that they're asking for a 2-1. That's their choice. That's their prerogative. That's the criteria they've set. There's no point getting angry about it. There's no point getting frustrated about it. So focus your efforts on those employers where they are open to folks with a 2-2. And then I think what you have to do is really create the narrative that matches the skills and the competencies, because there's plenty of research and evidence that says there isn't, unless you're going into a highly academic environment like law or medicine, where there is a strong correlation between academic attainment and career success and performance. Most other environments, there isn't a strong correlation, which is why we've seen employers moving away from using the 2-1 as a benchmark for success over the years. And indeed, many people either dropping or completely losing any requirements around UCAS points. There used to be quite high UCAS points benchmarks back in the day. So that would be my first point, is just control the controllables and focus on the employers who do welcome you and do want your application. And then what you have to do is beef up all the other bits. So if I know my academics aren't as strong in terms of my classification of degree, actually, what are all the other things and how can I make them as strong as possible? Be they competencies, be they experiences, be they certificates, be they online learning, digital learning, whatever it might be, that you can really demonstrate that's very relevant to the skills and competencies that they want in the role. So it's all about, you know, if you've got a weakness, all of us do as candidates. Nobody's ever a perfect candidate. Think about how you can beef it up with the things that are important. And again, you know, think about in your job search, looking for those employers that are not the brand names, people haven't heard of, looking at jobs, not graduate schemes, looking for jobs that haven't got the word graduate in the job title, much less viewed than other job titles. Actually reading the job description for job. Don't just look at a job title and go, oh, I don't like the sound of that. Read the job description. It might be the perfect job for you. It might be a perfect job. So go and have a look, find the jobs with the other people don't find, because when you do that, your competition's lower, and the fact that you've got a 2-1 or a 2-2 is probably much less relevant.
Yeah, fantastic. So we're coming up to our final live Q&A question now. But as we all leave the webinar today, a survey will pop up and it takes a couple of minutes to fill in, and we'd really appreciate your feedback. And just another reminder to head to prospects.ac.uk to register for free, where you can have access to free career advice, articles, videos, podcast episodes, and even CV and cover letter examples. So that's all there. You just need to register and you can do that for free. And the final question of our Q&A today: I am a student in my final year, but I've not been successful in getting internships, placements, or industry experience. What can I do at this current stage to get my foot in the door?
I'm trying not to go, hurrah, yes.
I think sometimes we give ourselves deadlines because you're in your final year does not mean you have you want it and it's a good thing, but it doesn't mean that that's where your learning ends. And after that, straight after that, you have to get a job or you do a master's or you do whatever you want to do. I think I know a friend that took a year off just because she wanted to take do different experiences. She emailed different employees and be like, I just want to come for experience. Obviously, it depends on the company, but like Rebecca has been saying all this time, smaller companies will easily accept you and want that, like really. So I think don't be bogged down that you're in your final year and you have no experience. You don't always have to have experience in the workplace. You can volunteer in uni or whatever, or you can there are loads of different things that you can do that doesn't have to relate to what you're studying or like an actual job. It can be volunteering. Yeah, I think don't be too bogged down about I'm in my final year and I don't have experience. You can literally give yourself time and say, oh, after all this, I want to go and work in different fields. if you start networking or you go to different events now, you will know smaller companies are coming to say, oh, hey, we have these kind of experiences available to you, even if it's not related to what you're doing now, but it's an experience that is valuable anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, completely. Fantastic. And Gareth?
Yeah, I was just going to add in, the idea of maybe doing some sort of volunteering that a couple of people have mentioned, also maybe some experience over the summer as well. Often, that could be a way forward. There's also a website which is called theforage.com, and they offer virtual work experience. So those are kind of like small blocks of work experience where it's basically like a kind of simulated project which a big company would give you. And sometimes they're kind of like 6 or 8 hours of work. So that those are kind of things that you can fit in alongside your studies. That's another idea for people as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. Rebecca?
Yes, I just have 2 more things to add. We're trying to give them lots of ideas here, aren't we, between us? You're going to have loads of things you can have a go at. The first thing I would say is there will be lots of work-like and work-related experiences potentially within curriculum that you can access. So they might be guest lectures, case studies, projects. All of those will give you the opportunity to actually have a go at something. It might be a business challenge or a business simulation, and develop those work experience skills. So look at what your university is offering in kind of the non-curricular offer that allows you to get some of those work related and work-like experiences, because there will be loads of stuff you'll be able to access in your final year, and often employers will use them as an opportunity to do a bit of talent spotting or networking and connection with people as well. So that could be a great way to meet people, build your connection and your skills without having had the work experience. And then the second thing to reassure you is huge proportions of students pop out of their final year and go, right, I'm ready for my graduate job now. Where are they? They get really focused on that final year and doing their finals and sucked into their studies. And then they pop out and go, oh, everybody got their job last year and I didn't realise, and oh, I haven't got any experience. So you are certainly not alone. There are, in fact, 2 big peaks now in the graduate recruitment hiring season. The traditional one, which is in autumn, but there's a second big peak, which is now almost just as big, which is in the summer, because we've recognised that lots and lots of students pop out after they graduate and they're looking for jobs. So don't worry, there will be jobs in that summer period. And if you haven't yet got any work experience and you're struggling to access some of those graduate jobs for the lack of that experience, have a look at graduate internships. Universities run an array of brilliant graduate internships for their students. Sometimes they're funded by Santander, sometimes they're regionally funded, sometimes they're collaborations between different universities, but they will work with small businesses in the local area and in the local region. Sometimes there'll be some funding available for the small businesses, but often they're just working with them because they want to get access to graduate talent. They're often specifically aimed at graduates who haven't yet got loads of experience but want to do a bit of kind of try before you buy. So graduate internships, which can be 3 to 6 months long, sometimes up to 12 months long, could be a great first foot in the door. And they're specifically designed for folks just like you, who perhaps pop out at the end having not got lots of experience. So don't worry, it's really normal. You're not alone.
Yay, that's a lovely tone to end it on. Thank you all so much for coming today. Thank you to our panelists for your great advice over the past hour. It's been really, really useful. This webinar has been recorded and you'll receive the link on demand. It can also be found on the Prospects website. And while you're there, you can register for free for career advice and jobs and so many other things. Just go check it out, prospects.ac.uk, and you can share it with anyone that wasn't here today. We do hope that you found this useful. Thank you so much for coming and have a great rest of your day.